Good morning, welcome, thanks for joining me. Today we'll be thinking and discussing the Mavic Pro. This one of DJI's flagship drones of the past. Getting a little long in the tooth, but that's great, for me at least, because it means I can afford one, and should I wish to mod it, there's others and parts and videos and how-tos all over the internet. So, what's the subject of today? I've been an owner of a Mavic Pro for just under a year. I've been flying drones for quite a bit longer than that with my trusty DJI Spark. Stepping up to the Mavic Pro, I expected benefits in all departments, and I wasn't disappointed. The only drawback I found was that the 4K footage, of which I was looking forward to greatly, needed a little bit of help. I tried colour grading, but that has its drawbacks, and at the risk of teaching you to suck eggs, when you're out flying at the sunniest part of the day, sometimes parts of the subject can be blown out, i.e. appear very white. And that's a shame, because you lose that much wanted detail. Now, a lot of Mavic Pro owners just accept this, but I've tried to work around it, as I say, with colour correcting software and trying to get my head around the actual settings of the camera. I'm a lover of the auto setting, and I'll have lost a lot of years at this point, but c'est la vie, whatever will be, will be. Getting back to the Mavic Pro blowing out the colours, or being flat. And for a while I never understood what people were getting at when they said the footage is flat. But like a lot of jargon, it's put there just to put you in your place. If you don't understand the terminology, you're a lesser person. Well, I've worked in engineering all my life, seen these grandiose terms come and go. We had a joke offshore in the early and mid-80s that the longer the name you had on your hard hat, the more important you were. So you can imagine we'd come up with some amazing descriptions of what we actually did as a mechanical fitter or technician or commissioning tech, ROV pilot, engineer, hydraulics, well, the list goes on. If you ever get an opportunity, look up what a dymo is. It's a little machine for making plastic labels that stick on your hard hat. And we would produce quite long labels. So terminology, it shouldn't make you feel superior or inferior. It just needs explanation. Once it's explained, you're the same person, you just have a little more knowledge. So getting back to flat. Flat in photography, and the Mavic Pro in particular, just seems to describe the opposite of vibrant colour. And I'll leave it at that. I'll let you look into it. So, how do I get more vibrant colour on a Mavic Pro? Well, as with a lot of my inventions, mods, call them what you may, it's a case of lots of things coming together. It may be ideas or products. And my dear old dad used to talk about steam engine time, and it's very true. When the world's ready, then things happen. Sometimes technology has been in place for many a long year, but it isn't steam engine time. And I've found this with my inventing and crazy ideas and mods over the years, that parts I have, and this is probably just another reason for all the hoarders out there to keep things in case they come in handy, because that's what happens with steam engine time. So let's keep the memory of my dad, Arthur Edmund Pollard. Let's keep his memory alive, adopting the term steam engine time. So, what was the steam engine time for me? Well, I've watched the trends of action cameras. Time to have a drink. I've watched the trend of action cameras as they improved the resolution, and I haven't been an early adopter, but then I've dipped my toe in. I've tried the cheap knockoff copies of big brand action cameras, and they all have failings. Sometimes they're just unusable. I've dabbled with early versions of big name brand action cameras. As you know, they like to bring out a new version each year, and the advertising suggests you have to have the latest version to be a worthwhile citizen. So I've tried early versions, and they all have severe drawbacks. Battery life being one of the major ones. Overheating, fogging when placed in cases for underwater footage. Crashing when you need them most. Corrupt files. So action cameras didn't solve everything, but I watched the specifications creep up, and the two things I follow are the improvements in stabilisation and the resolution. At present, here we are in 2021, and the resolution seems to be 4K, round about 30 or 60 frames a second. I've tried mounting them on drones, and some drones struggle. The Mavic Pro isn't one of them. It has quite a good load bearing capacity, but it's still a case of added weight and reduced flight time. And once it's up there attached to the drone, there's not a lot you can do about the angle. You've set that at takeoff, and any Wi-Fi signal you may be using to control it is out of range pretty quickly when it's on a drone, unlike the camera that comes with the drone, which with OcuSync, brilliant piece of technology, allows you to have fantastic image quality, transmission and strength of signal. So the action camera could give you 4K with a pretty static point of view, but you could live with that, fly a couple of times with different angles to get those different shots. But then came out a lightweight version of the Insta 360 This lightweight version is called the SMO 4K. Let's just call it the SMO for now. This is a 30-gram stripped down version of the Insta 360 And the one massive benefit of the Insta family of cameras is they have a fantastic piece of free software for a desktop PC where you can edit and manipulate that footage in post-production. And this is where they do any stabilization. So the 30-gram version of this camera, built specifically to mount on lightweight FPVs, which are tiny drones that go very fast, and the controller usually wears a headset, so it is as if you were a pilot, tilting and turning, flying and banking, accelerating. They're not very sophisticated for coming into land. They invariably just land them where they can, and it's the next thing to a crash each time. They're not built to hover, although they can, whereas the cinematic type of drone, of which the DJI Mavic Pro is one of the landmark drones, is absolutely rock steady for hovering. Fantastic. So if you've ever seen any of my videos where I use a tripod and wonder why, you'll see that I can have the controller and display device mounted on the tripod, fly the Mavic Pro, and if I ever let go of the sticks, which enables me to do a host of other things while I'm flying, then it just stays there waiting for my instructions. So, seeing the SMO 4K version of the Insta360-1R come on the market, I followed the pricing of it closely. It came in and out of the country sporadically. I was very tempted to be an early adopter at the high price point, but I didn't bite the bullet or pull the trigger, whatever you want to say. I didn't actually purchase one as an early adopter. But good old auction sites, everything turns up eventually, and I've just purchased one at a fantastic price. It's been used. It's had the power lead soldered to it, so hopefully when it arrives it's been carefully done and all works. But that's the thrill of the chase, I suppose, getting a bargain and then the anticipation. Now, I mentioned it had leads soldered to it. Well, that's how they get the camera to be 30 grams. It has two leads for the voltage. The voltage it accepts are between 6 volts and over 25 volts, in the blurb if you were to go to the various sites describing the SMO 4K camera, and it would take its power from the batteries on the FPV drone or any other radio control vehicle or toy. And if this gives half as good as the description suggests, then it's going to be fantastic as a secondary camera mounted on the Mavic Pro. So how would I use it? Two choices: carry another battery with further weight and all the logistics, or tap into the existing battery of the Mavic Pro. Tap into that battery which is round about 12 to 13 volts fully charged at the beginning of any flight. Fantastic batteries. I tried to cycle them. Touch wood, I haven't had any battery issues. I don't know what the current draw of this camera is going to be, but I'll soon make my mind up after the first few flights, and I see whether it shortens the flight time considerably and makes it unusable. But I'm optimistic. So the Mavic Pro has its battery mounted on the top. It clicks into place, which is very reassuring. And when we do a search for the pinouts, bit more jargon, sorry about that. Pinouts are just the connections on any device, describing what they are used for. When we do a search for the pinouts, we see that there's some pins are used for all sorts of spurious voltages, and some are straightforward positive and negative. And there's multiples of these on the battery and of course on the Mavic drone. There's multiple of these next to each other. I'm led to believe it's for redundancy, and that sounds a good plan. We don't want a lost connection, meaning a crash dropping from the sky. So having multiple pins supporting the positive and multiple pins supporting the negative makes sense, and that's what they mean when they use the term redundancy. So we're talking about lots of amperage in one of these fully charged batteries. A short, i.e. positive and negative touching together accidentally, would be catastrophic for the drone and any device. So, taking care, I did through due diligence. If you were to go for a job, a company would look into your background with due diligence. If you were to look into the pinouts of the battery, I urge you to do due diligence. Become familiar with test meters. Test a few other types of batteries with your battery tester. Get really familiar, and only then start probing with your test probes of the meter into the connectors or the batteries. At this point, all I can do is show my findings. It's not advice for anybody to follow. It's just my findings. So please take care if you are following any of my mods or ideas. Believe me, I've had a few electrical puffs of smoke and small fires over the years with various projects, and I wouldn't want you to go through that harrowing experience yourself. So we have, when it comes, a 4K camera accepting voltages between 6 and let's say 25. The DJI Mavic Pro, a battery fully charged, shows on the test meter around about 13 volts, enough to power the camera and the drone, of course. So, getting back to the pinouts and how things come together. On another project, I wanted some connectors for some 7.2 multi-battery, 7.2 volt radio control equipment batteries. These batteries had what's described as a Tamiya connector. So I sent off for some matching Tamiya connectors to put on other devices. This connector, which just, as you may guess, comes apart, male and female, has metal parts inside it for making the connections. And it's very convenient. Now when these connectors when these connectors came, they were on some waste material. If you're familiar with building model aircraft in your youth, or model cars from main makers Airfix, they came on a surround called a sprue. And this sprue was just a safe way to hold the parts. And similarly, the metal connectors for the Tamiya were on a sprue. And that sprue looked ideal to make connectors for the positive and negative pins inside the battery compartment on the Mavic Pro. Hardly any bending, a slight bit of modification with a miniature CNC bit, shaped the hole in the sprue part and created a connector. Following photographic advice I'd got from the internet, I knew which pins were positive and which pins were negative. I placed these newly made connectors over the parts within the battery compartment, put the battery in, and then used a test meter to see that there was no voltage until I powered up the drone. Once powered up, it was showing high 12 volts, nearly 13. All I had to do now was wait for the camera to come to see what length I needed for the cables, and make the joints safe, i.e. so they wouldn't swivel and touch together, and a bit of heat shrink on the cabling, and then hot glue under the cabling and over the cabling, created a little bit ungainly looking finished product, but safety is paramount. So, to cut a long story short, I decided to fit an SMO 4K camera to the Mavic Pro, use the battery power of the Mavic to power the SMO 4K camera, and in future videos we'll look at the footage and whether it was worth all the effort and whether the stabilization achieved in the software is good enough to create footage suitable for my out and about videos, filming castles and rivers and landmarks around the British Isles. So thank you very much for staying with me to this point. I really do appreciate it, and so thanks again for watching. Join me again soon. Bye.